Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by education reporter Jeremiah Poff. Jeremiah, there's been this major poll that was conducted, and Republican voters want one big thing from their presidential contenders in 2024. What might that be?
Well, so this poll found that over 80% of Republican primary voters want their presidential candidates to embrace culture war issues, especially education and parental rights. Obviously, this has been a huge issue with critical race theory and transgender issues within the school districts, right? So a lot of voters want that to be up the forefront of Republican primary candidates.
Mm-hmm. So obviously there aren't very many Republican candidates announced yet, although there's one big exception, and Nikki Haley has also gotten into the race. But there are people who are sort of adjacent to the field. So far, does it look like the 2024 contenders on the GOP side are answering this call?
Yeah, so Trump laid out a whole plan about confronting critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bureaucrats and parental rights. Nikki Haley didn't really say a whole lot about it. She did say that she did kind of put her foot down on America as a racist country,
right?
Saying that wasn't the case and that she was a living proof of that. But it definitely seems like there are other candidates other than Haley and potential candidates that have made a much stronger statement on this issue than her.
So someone who hasn't gotten into the race, maybe yet, who knows, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's clearly been very active on these types of issues, and he's been in a fierce public battle over the AP standards in his state. What is the source of the controversy there?
Right, so the state of Florida, the Department of Education in Florida prevented the College Board from implementing a pilot course, AP course for African American Studies. And the course is in a pilot for another year, but the College Board, which makes the AP courses, released their final version of the course at the beginning of February, and they took out a whole bunch of things that had been raised as objections by the DeSantis administration, including Black queer studies, some Black Lives Matter content, and I think slavery reparations.
Right.
From a very pro position, it seemed like on those issues. The College Board's been accused of caving to DeSantis, which they have insisted is not the case. In fact, over the weekend, they had a very forceful statement against DeSantis and basically accused him of politicizing the course. But it's just kind of another issue where DeSantis has really taken the education issue head on and really kind of in a sense blazed a trail policy-wise in ways that other states have not done.
So a lot of the reporting on this and a lot of the social commentary on this has framed this as a banning of the teaching of Black history in the state of Florida. Is that a fair critique?
It is not. In fact, the state of Florida actually requires Black history to be taught. The specific things that the Department of Education in Florida were objecting to in this course were more theoretical, critical theory, critical race theory stuff that specifically said that, you have to look at history through the lens of oppressor versus oppressed, and then obviously these like side anecdotes of Black queer studies, which the DeSantis administration says is basically Marxism.
So DeSantis is a good example of how the states have sort of engaged on a number of issues that the poll showed Republican voters would like to see their presidential candidates active on. There's another issue, access to pornographic websites and at what age that's appropriate, that we've seen some states starting to debate and legislate on. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so last year, Louisiana became the first state in the country to require pornography sites to implement an age verification, basically ID check, in order to access them. And right now there's a growing movement among states to kind of copy that. Efforts are underway in Virginia and West Virginia, Mississippi and Arkansas, and there's been legislation introduced in other states as well. But it actually, looks like it's a bipartisan issue. In fact, Louisiana has a Democratic governor who signed that bill, but in Virginia, the bill passed the Democrat-controlled state Senate by an overwhelming margin. So even though that bill hasn't been yet passed completely out of the legislature, I think it's an interesting place where we're seeing some political alliances forming that you might not otherwise have expected.
Right. It does seem that on a lot of social issues where people might be a little more libertine when it involves adults, you get children involved, people become much more socially conservative quickly.
Right. And it's illegal to show pornography to a minor, and I
Right.
think people are kind of using that as the impetus for this. So.
Thank you, Jeremiah. You can read Jeremiah and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.